From cruising down Sunset to winding down Lombard and all points in between. It's the John Phillips Show.
And we continue at 2:05 in the afternoon on the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wings in Culver City.
John, Alameda County has finally approved the sale of the Coliseum. Now AESEG has another year to come up with the money.
Okay, them coming up with the money is like the dad that leaves the family to go pick up cigarettes, and 7 days later, everyone in the house is still sitting by the window.
Every aspect of this deal seems so shady.
I can get that.
I'm telling you, my gut tells me her plan B was to go to work for that group if she lost re-election.
Like, don't waste our time. We have a whole city to run.
What a shady, shady, shady deal. 800-222-5222 is telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is the ABC News legal analyst and the co-host of the Too Many Lawyers podcast, which you can download wherever you download your favorite podcast. Royal Oaks, welcome.
Hey, my pleasure, John.
Well, let's go ahead and start out with the big news of the week, especially for all these culinary fanatics here in California, because In-N-Out Burger, which is one of the most iconic California businesses that I can think of, announced this week that they will be moving their offices, their administrative offices, from Irvine, California to the state of Tennessee. Lindsay Snyder, who is the owner of In-N-Out Burger, went on a podcast and said that the state of California is very difficult to do business in, and it's even harder to raise a family here. She doesn't want to do it. She's happy she grew up in Northern California. She's happy that her company has California roots, but she doesn't want to raise her family here anymore because of the condition of the state. And that's basically the feedback that she's getting from many of her employees, too, as the move to Tennessee was a welcome one. Now, what puts her at odds, or makes her different, I guess I should say, than so many of the other businesses in California, is that when they're upset about the state policies or they're upset at Gavin Newsom's performance as governor, they hold their punches. Go back to the COVID-19 shutdowns when Bob Iger was able to operate his park in Florida, but Disneyland in California was shut down for a very long time. He appealed to Gavin Newsom to allow him to reopen. Gavin Newsom said no, and in response, he resigned from a board that Gavin Newsom put him on in protest, but he wouldn't publicly criticize Newsom or finance the opposition to him for his reelection. You look at what's going on right now with the oil companies, where cap and trade is hurting them. State regulations, they're hurting them. They're upset at what's going on in Sacramento, but they won't publicly confront Gavin Newsom the way that Lindsay Snyder did. Why do you think that she has the freedom and ability to take the government and the governor head on, and all of these other companies are reluctant to do so? Do you think it has to do with the regulation of the oil industry and Disney, whereas she is not as regulated as some of those others?
Yeah, great question. I really think it's a matter of the fact that everybody knows California is circling the drain in terms of the law and regulations and quality of life, and it catches up. I mean, In-N-Out, they got to do something about it. I frankly wish they could have shortened the lines, because 45 minutes for hamburgers is not so fun. But yeah, to move from Irvine to Tennessee is a big deal. And just like elections have consequences, taxes have consequences. And it's just such an anti-business climate. And even though Gavin Newsom is a really smart, articulate guy, and when you listen to him spin California, you think, oh, maybe it's not so bad. But actually, it is that bad, and the laws are just so hard on companies. And we're going to see more and more people. I mean, Iger didn't want to tick off the big guy. Governor's very powerful, no matter what party or what the business or legal climate. So it's a danger. But when you see huge companies like In-N-Out make that move, yeah, I mean, Gavin Newsom, you got to do something to turn things around quickly, or else when he runs in a couple of years, the record is just going to be really bad. And the Democrats know they don't need California to be on the ballot. They're going to win California anyway, so he could have an uphill battle in the spring of 2028.
As a California boy, did you ever think you'd see the day where In-N-Out moved their offices out of the Golden State?
No, I mean, just you get this sort of superiority complex growing up in California. 50s, 60s, 70s, everybody that grew up and lived there, we always feel like, oh, we're the biggest and the best. Yeah, New York was fancy, Chicago's second city, but it just had this golden glow of newness and more people moving here. And so sadly, in the last 10 years, it's just we've gone in reverse. I mean, we really are circling the drain, and I think it all gets back to the idea that if you have a one-party environment, there are no consequences to doing something really stupid or just promising redistribution of wealth and so on. And you make these bad decisions and implement programs that don't work, but it doesn't matter because you've got a 3/4 in each in the Assembly and the State Senate lead by the Democrats, so the Republicans can't do anything about it no matter how bad things get.
Many moons ago, when there was a flurry of very wealthy people moving their residency out of state, then Assemblyman Rob Bonta wrote legislation that would allow the state of California to continue to tax them even when they became residents of another state. His argument was, well, you made your fortune in California, so we can lay claim to a portion of it even after you move. Could you envision a scenario where someone in the legislature tries to pull the same stunt with a company like In-N-Out?
Yeah, I can see them proposing it. I mean, what a crock, what a totally unfair, counterintuitive idea that is. And as I recall, there was major blowback. But again, if you don't have to worry about losing your job, then you can float trial balloons that are filled with material that nobody wants. And I wouldn't be surprised if he gave it a shot.
We're speaking with Royal Oakes, ABC News legal analyst. Royal, let's shift gears here and talk about the California insurance crisis, where we know that State Farm, Allstate, no longer selling homeowners insurance policies to California homeowners, California residents. You can buy them elsewhere, but not here. Some companies have moved out of the California market altogether, and some say they're contemplating doing the same thing. It's not just a problem for California homeowners. Small business owners are also having trouble finding insurance companies who are willing to sell them property, or sell them policies, rather. As you know, the insurance game is a game of risk, and if California becomes too risky, then these companies, using their fiduciary duty to their shareholders, say, all right, it's too risky for us, we'll sell policies elsewhere. One industry in particular that's been hit harder than others is the jewelry industry. Buying an insurance policy for a jewelry store is very difficult to do right now in California, and many of those stores are just straight up uninsured. They've also become targets for burglars, and not just any run-of-the-mill burglars, but professional operations, many of them coming into the country illegally from Chile, where that is their vocation, and they are very good at breaking into insurance, and into jewelry stores, rather, and stealing all of the jewels. And if your jewels are stolen and you have no insurance policy, you're out of luck. And that's what so many of them are experiencing. There was a recent case in the city of Anaheim that we talked about earlier this week, where a small jewelry store was being robbed by over a dozen people showing up in masks all at once. The owner realized what was about to happen. He fires a warning shot into the air, and the crooks scatter. Nothing was stolen from that particular store, but that's what he had to do to protect himself, because the government right now is not protecting these business owners from these professional robbery organizations. What do you think is going to happen if the state doesn't figure out a way to shut this down, and an entire industry is basically operating without insurance, where they know if they get hit, that's the end of them?
Yeah, no, to be a death penalty for various industries and businesses that have a hard time getting insurance. And the reason they're having a hard time getting insurance really is because the government has just stepped in and over-regulated. It all started back in the 1980s when the state of California passed a proposition that said, hey, you property and casualty insurers, liability, homeowners, your rates are too high. So guess what? We're going to roll your rates back to a year before, November 1988, and then we're going to chop those by 20%. And if you want to increase rates, well, you come knocking on the door of the insurance commissioner. And the law says that the commissioner has to approve rates, and the commissioner has to decide, are they discriminatory? Well, nobody likes that, so, that's fine. Or are they inadequate? Are they too low? That's pretty rare. Or are they excessive? So now you got the economics guru, the Maynard Keynes, in the insurance commissioner's office deciding if somebody's rates are too high. But the problem is, insurance is like any other business. There are literally thousands of insurance companies competing for your business. And if your rates are really high, you don't have to go to State Farm or Progressive or whatever. You can go to any company you want, and there are lots of them. So then the kicker is, well, what about some folks, fair plan, you're in a high-risk area, fire and so on. That's why we have what you call guarantee associations. Every insurer has to take a percent or 0.5% of their premiums and kick it into a big pool of money available to pay costs and claims for people who are in high-risk fire areas. And that's how it should work. Let the system work by competition, by price, and if somebody is just priced out, if it's super high risk, jewelry, or you're living right next to a fire area, then you go to the Guarantee Association policy. It's not as big and fancy a policy as you'd get from farmers or whatever, but that's the way the system should work. But when the regulators and the politicians think that they know best in terms of economics and they want to, tear up the law of supply and demand, then you get these shortages and you get, the crooks, they're smart. They read the papers. They know that they're probably not going to get prosecuted for various kinds of thefts, and away they go.
Well, you look at the issue that you just described, the regulation of the insurance industry. It's not a particularly sexy subject. It's not something that the layman probably knows a whole lot about. But if you screw that up, as we have, and you create a situation where this entire industry is basically uninsured because of regulation, and you have situations where professional groups of crooks are going in and robbing them, at some point something bad is going to happen. At some point, one of these shopkeepers is going to shoot one of these crooks, and then we know what the next chapter is. You're going to see a picture of the crook in the cap and gown. They were a pillar of the community. They were getting their life back together. They came here illegally from Chile for a better life, and this is what they had to do because they felt that they had no other options, and then the town burns. And I don't think that they understand what kind of fire they're playing with, to borrow a term, but they are, because of their failure to regulate an industry and their failure to shut down crime.
No, that's right, and that gets back to the point I made about the crooks being smart and reading the papers. You remember those weird images during COVID of guys literally riding little Vespa scooters through your CVS drugstore, grabbing one item after another, grabbing a calculator so they could total up how close it gets to $950, because they knew from the news if they stole under $950, then it's not only not a felony, it's only a misdemeanor, it won't be prosecuted. So then they'd go out to the parking lot, hand the stuff to their Confederate, put it in the trunk of the car, take the Vespa back in, and the security guards are recording this for the local news, and that's how we knew about it. So, yeah, if you're not going to enforce the law, at least DA Nathan Hochman is a breath of fresh air. I mean, you've seen some of his talks, press conferences, not just about Menendez, but about the issues of crime and theft and so on. And he says, I'm the new sheriff in town, actually DA, and we're actually going to prosecute criminals. You're going to wind up in jail if you do this stuff. So hopefully, if the crooks keep watching the news, they'll see Nathan Hochman and maybe they'll behave better. But it's really discouraging.
We're speaking with Royal Oakes, who is the co-host of the Too Many Lawyers podcast, which you can download wherever you download your favorite podcasts. Royal, we saw an interview, or a series of interviews, I guess I should say, with former first son Hunter Biden, where I know he claims that he's clean and off drugs. He looked like an out-of-control drug addict in these interviews, where he was settling scores with all of his enemies. The profanity was coming out a mile a minute. He told people how to cook crack properly. It was a really bonkers interview. And you look at what's going on right now in Washington, where the former physician of former President Joe Biden was asked about his cognitive abilities, his senility. He took the fifth on basically all of the questions, as have many other people who worked in that White House. We know Joe Biden wasn't all there. That's the reason that he dropped out of the race. But what we don't know for sure is just exactly who was running the country. Many of us have our own theories, but none of us know with 100% certainty. We know that one of the people that he talked to on a regular basis and at one point moved into the White House, one of his closest confidants, by his own admission, was his son Hunter. If Joe was as out of it as we think he was, and Hunter was the one who had his ear and was basically running the country as an unelected child of a president, is there any way we can walk back some of these auto pen declarations from Joe Biden where he provided pardons, for example, for a whole slew of people that he claimed publicly that he wouldn't do before he issued those pardons? Maybe some appointments, lifetime appointments that he made to the bench. If it wasn't actually Joe making these decisions, it was Hunter.
Yeah, I think there is a way to do it, and we've all sort of dabbled reading a few campaign books because it was such a fascinating ride, and I've seen some references to the fact that, in the final months before Biden dropped out, Hunter Biden really was a key advisor for him. But, of course, there was also a small cadre of guys and gals who were pretty much pulling the strings, and if you could establish, and I know the congressional Republicans are trying to do this, but if you could try to establish that the auto pen thing, it's fine to use an auto pen, but you got to make sure that the president, whose name is being imprinted with the auto pen, really knew what he was doing, was presented with it, and this really was his executive order, or his signature on a bill or whatever. If you can demonstrate through subpoenas and depositions and testimony before Congress that, in fact, he didn't know about it, and there should be some kind of a trail through meetings and advice, and, this is my decision, I think you could certainly walk that back. I mean, in terms of appointments, lifetime appointments for judges, that's a deal where, the Senate approved it, and so it would be awfully difficult, I think, to say, well, even though the Senate said yes, Joe really didn't know who was being appointed, so we'll have to unwind that. That probably is a tougher putt. But I think in terms of a lot of the executive orders, it's legitimate to find out what did he know in terms of this auto pen stuff.
Royal, what's coming up on the next Too Many Lawyers podcast?
We're going to talk about Scott Peterson. He could be freed. He's got the Innocence Project saying, you know what, he didn't do it because the baby Connor, the fetus, actually grew for a few weeks after the date of the murder alleged against Scott Peterson. So that's going to be percolating through the courts. Plus, we're going to do a little preview of the Menendez brothers' parole hearing next month. They could get out via parole or clemency or brand new evidence. So things are hopping on the high-profile trial front.
And you can, of course, download the Too Many Lawyers podcast wherever you download your favorite podcast. Royal, thanks so much for stopping by, and have a great rest of your day.
You bet. Thanks.
It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is a former member of the Los Angeles City Council, Councilman Dennis Zine. Welcome.
Well, good afternoon. Pleasure to be with you. And I always emphasize, never interviewed by the FBI and never indicted as a council member.
So you're the one. All right. Well, yesterday we did 3 stories that were very, very, very similar in nature. Tragic stories, but similar stories with a very clear through line. First, there was a double murder that took place in Encino, where after the suspect was caught, we learned that they had a rap sheet the size of a CVS receipt. Just crime after crime after crime. Was supposed to be in prison, let out early, of course, because that's what we do here in California. And after we let them out early, it produced disastrous results. Then, in Oakland, a very similar story where a probation officer, who wasn't even working on the case of this particular individual, was murdered in cold blood, allegedly, by yet another career criminal, someone who was in and out of the court system over and over and over again, should have been in prison, wasn't, was allowed to go out and kill a uniformed officer in the line of duty. Then, in Los Angeles, over at Runyon Canyon, there was an arson that took place where, thankfully, a good Samaritan, a former football player, was able to subdue the individual, so the cops were able to show up and arrest him. But that could have been completely disastrous had that Good Samaritan not stepped in and helped put that fire out and apprehend that suspect the way that he did, we learned that that suspected arsonist also has a rap sheet a mile long. We know what happens when you allow career criminals to have access to civil society, and we are reminded of those consequences on a daily basis, yet the powers that be here in the state of California, for whatever reason, don't want to lock anyone up. They want all of these people out in the name of equity. Your thoughts?
Well, my thought is, it brings me back to George Gascon, who helped destroy Los Angeles County and public safety in the 88 cities of Los Angeles County. And I think George Gascon was responsible for a lot of the criminals that still prey on society. So now we're with a new district attorney who does prosecution. We have shrinking law enforcement in Los Angeles, in particular Los Angeles Police Department. The numbers are shrinking constantly. And when we find a situation in downtown Los Angeles where we had a major disturbance, and we go on not only a tactical alert, but a full mobilization. I don't think the public understands. When the LAPD mobilizes, that means every single person, no matter what your rank, you're in uniform, and you're going to be deployed on 12-hour shifts. 12 hours on, 12 hours off. And then when you do that and call in for mutual aid, you call for the Sheriff's Department to send in resources in Beverly Hills and other municipal agencies, because we can't handle the disturbance plus handle radio calls throughout the region of Los Angeles City. That is a perilous situation for not only the personnel and law enforcement, but for the victims, the potential victims, the 7-Elevens, the takeovers, the street takeovers. It becomes unmanageable. And I don't think people realize the significance when we don't have the resources to handle all these problems. If you call 911 and it rings and rings and rings because we are short of dispatchers, and then you have an incident and they say, well, make a telephonic report or make a computer report, or we can't send anybody. I mean, the public safety in this region is really suffering from what the people deserve and what they need and what they're paying for. And then when the military comes in, and there's controversy, why did the military come in? Well, believe me, if the military didn't come in, I don't know who would have been there to help bolster the resources. You can only push your troops, your LAPD personnel, so far. So when those detectives aren't handling those cases and they're pushed aside because they're working these 12-hour uniform assignments trying to quell a disturbance, you've got a major catastrophe at hand. So people need to realize, if you don't have the resources, you don't have the protection, you're all victims. And whether you're in a gated community, and we see more and more people in gated communities with the video, and these criminals know how to bypass the video, they break in. I know an individual currently running for city council. He's a current candidate for LA City Council. His house was not only broken into, but his car was broken into. And I spoke with him about it. I said, you've been a victim. You know what it feels like. So the people of LA need to realize, you don't have a police department that has the personnel that it really needs to contain violence. And with the Olympics, and they talk about all these avenues of progress and prosperity for Los Angeles, if you don't have public safety, you're going to have a dismal turnout of population that want to visit and want to participate in those events because they're not going to feel safe. That's the problem, is we need additional resources and a DA, which we have now, who's doing the job. And we need incarceration. And some people say, don't incarcerate, it's terrible. If we don't incarcerate, then the rest of us are going to be victims. And we don't want to be victims. We want to live in a peaceful society. And why is it that the In-N-Out Burger, she's moving to Tennessee? Where did the former chief of Los Angeles Police Department move? He moved to Tennessee. Talk about people who leave and retire, and they go to these other states where they can feel safe, raise a family, and not be continuing plagued with crime and violence. And a burglary that commits a murder that kills 2 innocent people, that community is outraged. So the LAPD will send in whatever resources, but they don't have the ability to continue it for a long period of time. They may send in the cavalry, the mounted unit for a period of time. They may send in Metro for a period of time, but they don't have the ability to really sustain that deployment because they're so short of personnel. And who suffers? The public suffers. The innocent people who are paying the taxes, who believe in democracy, they're the ones who suffer.
let's go back to Encino for a minute, because Encino is regarded as one of the safer neighborhoods in Los Angeles. It's certainly a very expensive zip code to buy into or even to rent a property in. The residents of Encino were so appalled at the condition of that neighborhood that they had a neighborhood meeting about public safety because it is such a crisis right now. The district attorney, Nathan Hochman, showed up to this meeting, but the councilwoman representing the district, Nithya Raman, was a no-show. The mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, was a no-show. She has time to do national interviews talking about Donald Trump, but she doesn't have time to show up in a neighborhood where two people were just murdered in cold blood by someone who should have been in prison. Could you imagine having a tragedy like that in your district and your residents, your constituents, putting together an emergency meeting to talk about what to do about it and not showing up?
Well, I will tell you, when I was the council member and I represented part of that San Fernando Valley, the southwestern region of San Fernando Valley, anytime something happened, I was there. And I notified LAPD at the time, the divisions that were responsible. Something happens, I want to be notified. I don't care 24 hours a day. I want to be notified, and I'm going to respond to make sure that we have the resources and the response that we need. But what we find happening, that area's been hit by a lot of 459s burglaries. And these people come in with the masks and the hoods, and they go in, and it doesn't matter what kind of alarm system you have. It doesn't matter what kind of security you have. And they got private security. They got everything you can imagine. And they come in and not only commit the burglary, but in this particular case we talk about, they killed two people. Two innocent people are dead for burglars. Where's the politicians that are going to clamor for more support? But again, you have council members in LA City Council that vote no on anything to do with the police. Anything to do with the police, they vote no. And that's a growing trend, which is a sad trend for the safety of the people of Los Angeles, in particular the San Fernando Valley. So a council member needs to be there, needs to be standing side by side with law enforcement to say, what are they going to do? I know the city has $1 billion deficit, but the fact is, what are you going to do to solve the problem? And I find it interesting when I talk about the $1 billion deficit. What did the council do after that budget was approved? They went on vacation for a month. They're still on vacation. And the taxpayers are saying, who's going to take care of us and our families and our businesses? When you have this type of tragedies occur in these lucrative areas, and the bad guys don't go where they can't find money and valuables, they go in Encino, Tarzana. They go to those lucrative areas, those nice areas, Porter Ranch. They go where there is money. Westwood, that's where they go. Bel Air, they go for those areas. And the people think they have security, and they don't. And then I question how many people, how many listeners right now have applied for a CCW, a character concealed weapon? How many have applied or in the process of getting a concealed weapon because they don't feel safe and they don't feel secure? That gives you an example of how bad it is and how the people need to have someone, including their council member, show support and be there and then say what I can appropriate as a council member to help increase the patrols. What can I do from my budget to help the LAPD put more personnel out? That's what we need to have done. But sadly, if a council member doesn't show up for something like that, I don't know what they're going to show up for.
Well, that councilwoman, Nithya Raman, is a Democratic Socialists of America member. She is not alone on that council. That bloc seems to be growing. We have now seen a socialist candidate get elected to be mayor of Chicago. One just won the Democratic primary to be the next mayor of New York City, and one in Minneapolis just won the endorsement of the Democratic Party over the incumbent Democratic mayor of Minneapolis. Do you fear that if Karen Bass, who's up for re-election in the next cycle, if Karen Bass loses this next election, it won't be to someone like Rick Caruso. It won't be to someone who cares about public safety. It'll be to another DSA type of candidate that we've seen run with great success in places like Chicago, New York, and potentially Minneapolis.
Well, when I heard about New York, it just, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe an individual that wants to basically turn lawlessness to the environment of New York. With Rick Caruso, I don't know if he's eyeing this. I do get emails from him along with other people send emails out regarding public safety. Police commissioner, he's a fine man. Whether he's going to run or not, I don't know. I know Karen Bass has her plate full with activities and issues and the lack of police officers. There was an incident, actually a meeting I went to recently, and I asked her specifically about the LAPD, and she said the problem is backgrounds. Well, if there's a problem with backgrounds, let's fix it. She said we have over 2,000 applicants. Well, if we've got 2,000 applicants, why can't we push them through the system in personnel department? Let's fix it. But the mayor has a lot of issues on her plate, and I don't forecast what's going to happen down the road, but I do know that, and I will say, and I'm still a reserve with LAPD. I joined LAPD in 1968. Some of the listeners weren't even born in 1968, and I've been serving LAPD since 1968. I'm currently a reserve officer with LAPD, work in the field in the San Fernando Valley, in addition to my 12 years in the city council. So I know this by the back of my hand because I grew up in this city, born and raised in this city. I'll probably die in this city, but I don't want to die being a crime victim. But Mayor Bass has her hands full. But if you can't establish public safety, I don't know what else you can establish. The movie industry struggling, public safety, and these street takeovers. We used to have street racing. Well, we'd arrest them, we impound the car. But now it's not only street racing, street takeover, but now they loot the businesses adjacent to where they're street racing and where they're doing these donuts in the middle of the street. It's gotten totally out of control. They call the police, and maybe one or two cars respond, and they're smothered with 500 or 600 people. Well, those officers aren't fools. They're not going to jump out and play Superman. So they call for assistance. By the time the assistance is there, it's too late. I cannot explain how serious it is. I hope the listeners wake up to reality. If you don't make some changes in the city, we're going to end up like some of these cities that have had nothing but crime and violence, like Oakland, where they closed the In-N-Out Burger in Oakland because of crime and violence, and the governor put in the highway patrol to help the Oakland Police Department police the city. How tragic is it when you deteriorate public safety to that degree? God help us.
Councilman, you are raising money for the LAPD Mounted Platoon. They have a golf tournament that's coming up in the city of Whittier on September the 19th at 11:30 in the morning. If you want to buy tickets and participate in this golf tournament, you can do so at lapdmountedplatoon.com. Tickets available there, and you can go ahead and buy as many as you want or make a donation, whatever the case may be. Councilman, you've been active with that group for some time.
Yes, I serve on their board. I do a lot of organizations, serve with a lot of organizations, including the Mounted Unit. While the city provides the officers, they have to go to private funding for a lot of the equipment for the horses, the saddles, etc. So we had a volunteer Mounted Unit for many years, and years ago they did decide to sponsor it, to pay for it, but they don't pay for it all. So the officers of the Mounted Unit have to do a golf tournament annually to raise funds so they can get a lot of the equipment they need. So if you're into golfing, we anticipate it's going to be a great turnout. They treat you well, they treat you right. It's all sponsored by the officers in their time from the Mounted Unit. And if you're into horses, come out and participate and involve that, involve yourself in that. But the Mounted Unit does a great job. It's very expensive to operate. The city pays some of it, but they don't pay all the fees and the obligations. Remember, those horses have to be cared for 24 hours a day. So anyone who can participate in that, we appreciate the donations, the contributions. And if you're a golfer, which I'm not, I've tried many times, but I'm not a golfer, but I will be participating in any way I can to help foster that particular unit, the LAPD Mounted Unit. Very, very valuable for the safety of Los Angeles.
The website is lapdmountedplatoon.com. That's where you can buy your tickets to participate in the golf tournament. Councilman Dennis Zine, thanks so much for stopping by.
My pleasure, John. Thank you.
It's the John Phillips Show.